We're going to have to rebuild within this wild, wild west of information flow some sort of curating function.
It's time for the AxisOfEasy podcast, the weekly technology digest that keeps you ahead of the curve.
We've got to maybe do something with the internet.
Brought to you by EasyDNS.com.
Somebody will say, oh, freedom of speech, freedom of speech. These are foolish people.
Sendgrid account hack leads to spike in spam levels. FritzFrog P2P botnet targets vulnerable servers. Epic Games ignites a developer rebellion in Apple and Google app stores. And Blame Canada, CenturyLink outage cascades across major internet providers. Hello everyone, this is Mark Jeftovic here with another episode of the AxisOfEasy Weekly Digest. This is episode 161. We're recording this on August 31st, and the show notes will be on AxisOfEasy.com/161. Last week's quote was, "When the search for truth is confused with political advocacy, the pursuit of knowledge is reduced to the quest for power." That was Alston Chase, and nobody got it. This week's quote is, "Too many political solutions are solutions to problems created by previous political solutions and will be followed by new problems created by their current solutions." Remember the rules, no searching it up. First person to post the correct source of this quote to the show notes page will get their next domain or web hosting renewal, courtesy of us. So let's get down to it. The Sendgrid account hack leads to a spike in spam levels. For a few weeks, I've been noticing increased levels of phishing emails to my personal account from Sendgrid mailers. Sendgrid, as you probably know, it's a large, legitimate transactional email service. And so I think they're also owned by Twilio now. So at first I chalked it up. It had to be rogue accounts and they'd soon be terminated. And, it's an isolated incident, but they kept coming and almost intensifying. I started to really wonder about it. It's not like you can actually block Sendgrid if you're running an ISP because you're going to cause too much collateral damage. Then I saw a couple of threads on the MailOp mailing list talking about it, and then finally via Krebs on Security we got the news that Sendgrid is dealing with a significant account breach. A bunch of hacked customer account credentials are being sold on the dark web, and the creds are being used to blasts that everyone is getting. And how the accounts were breached in the first place, not known. But that's the situation right now, and hopefully it will get under control soon. Sendgrid is going to force multi-factor authentication across all accounts. That's one of the things they're doing to try and get out in front of this. Police increasingly want access to smart speaker recording. So this was an article in Wired about how police work and evidence gathering has come to include gathering data from smartphone devices and speakers and Amazon Echo, smart TVs, that sort of thing. In one particular case, the recordings of an argument inside a home that ended in a fatality was used by the legal defense team to exonerate their client of a second-degree murder charge. Somehow, the victim was impaled by a 12-inch blade at the end of a bedpost. And the recordings obtained from a pair of Amazon Echo speakers explained how that happened and cleared the defendant. But more often than not, this data is used to do things like nullify alibis or collect evidence to be used against the accused. Quote, Douglas Orr, head of the Criminal Justice Department at the University of North Georgia, says police now look for smart home data as routinely as data from smartphones. Data on a smartphone often points officers towards other devices, which they can then probe as the investigation continues. By amending a search warrant, police can keep going to keep collecting data, Orr says. That usually leads to an Echo or at least some other device, end quote. The article goes on to describe how the likes of Amazon and Google and other device manufacturers now routinely receive requests from Everything from the Department of Homeland Security, which gets higher priority, down through the various police forces, and then even civil legal proceedings like divorce cases. It also talks about how police forces are creating templates for making these data requests and then sharing those templates with other police forces. Blame Canada. CenturyLink outage cascades across the major internet providers. Sunday morning, I heard some rumblings of possibly another Cloudflare outage, but it wasn't a Cloudflare thing. What actually happened was a US service provider called CenturyLink went down, and it took out services all the way from Amazon, Twitter, Microsoft, Namecheap, Discord, and large chunks of Cloudflare. And while CenturyLink is a US outfit, the outage was attributed to a misconfigured flow spec rule in a router in Mississauga, Ontario, as ZDNet put it. Quote, the issue originated from CenturyLink's data center in Mississauga, a city near Ontario, Canada. End quote. Yeah, it's near Ontario. For those of you who are wondering why I'm chuckling, Ontario is a province in Canada about the size of several large countries in the world. Anyhow, so this misconfiguration resulted in some kind of bad BGP announcement, which caused a lot of wreckage around the internet. We've written about this before, that the state of BGP routing tables is kind of held together with spit and twist ties. It's really kind of scary if you look down under the hood. More on that hack that contributed to Nortel's demise. We've written about this before, the role of China in the fall of Nortel. I will reiterate, when a company implodes, it's almost always self-inflicted. But in this case, maybe part of that self-inflicted damage that Nortel did to itself was ignoring the fact that Chinese operatives had penetrated the company. They were warned by Canada's intelligence agency, CSIS, at least 2 years before things really got out of hand. It looks like the company ignored it. So that's kind of a pattern of complacency, I guess. Global News did another piece on it, detailing an investigation undertaken by a security advisor to Nortel named Brian Shields. Quote, Shields found that a computer in Shanghai had hacked into the email account of an Ottawa-based Nortel executive. Using passwords stolen from the executive, the intruder downloaded more than 450 documents from LiveLink, a Nortel server used to warehouse sensitive intellectual property, end quote. And the more this Brian Shields guy looked into it, the worse it got. The account wasn't the only one compromised. Shields found at least 7 others. And it wasn't just random hackers, it was organized, and the indications were that it was a state-sponsored action originating in China. And Huawei, of course, was rumored to be a beneficiary of this stolen Nortel IP. Surveillance firm Palantir unveils details of an IPO. News emerged last week that Palantir's S1 had been filed. Actually, it leaked before it was filed, and screenshots were posted to the internet, but the S1 is now up on the SEC server. Looks like the company posted a $580 million loss on $742 million in revenue, which is apparently a disappointment. The disappointment isn't the loss. The disappointment is that the top line revenues were rumored to be pushing $1 billion in revenues, and that came in a little light. Most of Palantir's clients are government agencies. They're trying to move more into the commercial realm, but as per a Zero Hedge article, Palantir's client list includes the CIA, the FBI, the NSA, the CDC, the Marine Corps, the Air Force, the Special Operations Command, West Point, and the IRS. And from Palantir's S1, quote, we build software platforms for large institutions whose work is essential to our way of life. Those institutions must be able to function in times of stability as well as crisis and uncertainty, end quote. And I guess we're probably in one of those latter periods now. Looking at these S1s, I came across this other S1 from a company called Snowflake, which I have never heard of, but apparently this is one of the most anticipated IPOs of 2020. And I looked at it and reading through this thing, their losses exceeded their total revenues over the last 2 years. So they lost 178 million in losses on 96 million in revenues in 2019. And for 2020, they lost 348 million on top line revenues of 264 million. They've already done a funding round this year, just a few months ago. I think in February, they did a $479 million round on a $12.4 billion valuation. And I think that was their Series D or E. I kind of lost track trying to track it down. The S1 says they have no specific use plan for the funds that they raised via the IPO other than general corporate use, including possibly acquiring some other company, hopefully one that actually makes money. And it further states that they'll never pay a dividend. It has an accumulated shareholders deficit close to $1 billion and no clear path to profitability. The IPO floats Class A shares that carry 1 vote per share, while the early stage founders carry Class B shares that hold 10 votes per share. The S1 also cautions investors that they cannot operate at their current burn rate without raising additional funds, and they may have to issue additional shares to do that, which would further dilute whoever buys these shares. As I was reading through this S1, I had to keep reminding myself that I'm reading an S1 for a hot to trot IPO and not a going concern statement that auditors attach to MD&As for firms they think aren't going to make it. But here we are. The article I found this S1 in was talking about how their Facebook likes and LinkedIn headcount is off the charts, and I guess that's what matters these days. And if I'm appearing too harsh, in the show notes page, I did link to a Seeking Alpha article that states the bull case for this IPO. And I also linked back to a piece I wrote out of the cave called Unicorn Bingo, which talks about, in my opinion, how these kinds of IPOs are only made possible in a world where central banks are printing trillions of dollars across all currencies and how governments basically can't tolerate any kind of decline in the stock market. FritzFrog P2P botnet targets vulnerable servers. Security researchers have uncovered a new P2P botnet that is targeting government and enterprise SSH servers worldwide. SSH servers are secure shells, places where you can get a Unix command line and from there do whatever you need to do in order to join the host to a botnet, install additional malware, then use it as a foothold within the host's network. FritzFrog is written in Golang and was discovered by a security researcher named Ophir Harpaz while working on a project called the Botnet Encyclopedia. Once FritzFrog brute forces itself onto a new node, it sets up shop and it gets to work doing what seems to be its primary function, which is mining cryptocurrency. It installs XMR Rig, a Monero miner, and starts plugging away, courtesy of the infected host's CPU and power. Jesse Hirsch also covered this in MetaViews, and I linked to that in the show notes as well. Epic Games ignites developer rebellion in Apple and Google App Stores. So Fortnite creator Epic Games is in a battle with Apple and Google over in-app purchases and whether the video game firm will have access to the app stores for both companies. It started when Epic created an alternative method within its app to purchase additional upgrades for Fortnite. Apple objected, kicked them out of the App Store. Epic is holding their ground. They're calling Apple's 30% slice of all App Store purchases a type of monopoly and an abuse of their market position. And Epic is now suing Apple in a Northern California court. There's a new version of Fortnite due out any minute now. It might already be out. I don't really follow it that much, and the gamers seem to be caught in the middle. There's even a vibrant aftermarket for old iPhones that still have Fortnite installed. They're going for up to $1,000 a pop. Matt Stoller, the author of a book called Goliath, The 100-Year War Between Monopoly Power and Democracy, which I have, is a good book. He described it as Epic Games having kicked off a civil war within American business, and he's got a pretty good write-up on it as well. Finally, Minds.com CEO Bill Ottman and the knotted web of big tech hypocrisy. So this week I had to do the AOE Salon a day early. I had a family thing the usual day, so Charles and Jesse couldn't make it. But I had the honor and the pleasure to host Minds.com CEO Bill Ottman to talk about big tech market dominance, how service providers can properly act as intermediaries for user-generated content, and what it's like competing with the likes of Facebook. I found myself reconnecting to my Minds account. I created one when I was researching my Unassailable book, and I started kind of playing around with the platform again. I'm Mark JR on Minds if you're there. We've also created an AxisOfEasy account if you're there, and maybe you will be, because we have made an arrangement so if you create a Minds account, you go to the show notes page, you do it through the special link we set up there. EasyDNS is going to stake you with 10 off-chain Minds tokens that you can use to boost your content or reward other content creators. So the more I'm back on Minds, especially after this bloody awful Facebook user interface update that they just sprang on me last week sometime. I can't stand it. So I'm looking at Minds more, and if I can get all my homies from the Easyverse on Minds, then I won't have to go on Facebook at all. So go to the show notes page, axisofeasy.com/160, scroll down to this story, use the link that we have there to set up your Minds account, and we'll give you 10 Minds tokens in your account after that's all set up. And also check out the interview I did with Bill Ottman. Once again, the show notes for this week's edition are at axisofeasy.com/161. That's it for this week. I hope everyone is prepared to get back to school. Stay healthy, stay sane, and we will see you all next week.
Cause he's an entrepreneur. Gotta keep those women working, but you're looking good, I swear. That's Bangladesh. Rhymes rich, you're fresh. You're just a whore at the company store.